I want to start with a bit of a buzz and just use this film as background as we dive into this discussion of what is Mormon video art or talking about Mormon video art. So while film and camera existed long before the 1960s, and artists such as Dali and many others had experimented with film before, video art as an artistic practice didn't emerge until the early 1960s when Sony first released the Portapak, the first mass-marketed, affordable consumer brand video equipment. And this appears not to be working. There we go. Buzzing behind me is Yoko Ono's Fly. I apparently can't control volume. Felix, can you allow me to control volume? Thank you. This new and accessible video camera allowed everyday people and artists to find new possibilities inherent in emerging technologies, offering a useful platform, particularly for artists who are already exploring conceptual art, performance art, installation art, happenings, and other art practices. So I wanted to show you a few as I talk. This is Martha Rosler's Semiotics of the Kitchen. All right, and if I would love for the video to play with the sound to go silent, if that's a possibility. The video offered an affordable way to make representations in partnership with other practices. So video art helped, oh, is it right there? That fancy part, thank you, Felix. Thank you. So video art helped disrupt the art world with forms such as painting and photography and sculpture, which were long held norms. Radically new for its time, video art also drew artists who were similarly interested in change, specifically those related to social, political, art historical, and gender critiques, including the feminist art movement and others. And so that's why you have this very aggressive fork from Martha Rosler. Video art takes a variety of forms from gallery installations and sculptures and incorporates television sets, projectors, or computer ephemera to recordings of performance art and works created specifically to encounter and encourage distribution on tapes, DVDs, or digital files. The currency that video art provides to artists remains today, albeit rarely on actual videotape today, on platforms such as forums, chat rooms, Facebook, YouTube, Snapchat, Instagram, Vimeo, interactive video games, and many, many other platforms, which allow the work to be mass distributed, duplicated, have a multivalent experience within a framework of temporality, anti-commodification, and disappearance. So many also use videos to explore the continuation or the manipulation of other media, in the case with Nam June Paik. And also William Kentridge, who used it as a form of drawing that was then animated. One of the aspects of video art is its accessibility. So it can be distributed, shareable, transferable, and in some places it lacks a tangible original. And that while painting is easily commodifiable, video at times can present problems, countering issues and market concerns. In some cases, this demodification is precisely what is desired by the artist. They want to think outside of the art market. And in others, artists seek to rarefy their work by serializing videos, selling them in editions in a way to make rare what is inherently ephemeral. Additionally, video works are often shown only on limited platforms. And in the case of this lecture, I made a conscious choice to show mostly works that were readily available online so that you could go home and watch them yourself. But it is a medium that is inherently transferable or transportable, but also very often stuck in the gallery. Artists want their work to be seen on certain scales in certain proportions and have a particular kind of installation to it. And therefore, ironically, that while video has the capacity to be the most shareable, it can be sometimes the hardest to find, as artists seek to find ways to limit access to protect their intellectual copyright. Of note for our festival today, the first video art was footage of a religious figure recorded by Nam June Paik while he was sitting in traffic. This was the Pope's visit to New York City and was created in 1965. And he presented it as serious artwork. This was the first time video art was presented as such. And while I could not find that footage, I found another example of his work. This is TV cello. So Pike later wrote a manifesto encouraging other artists and activists to use video as a tool for empowering, to fight back against the establishment, especially for what he called one-way broadcast television companies, a utopian mission he would continue to pursue throughout his career. He was he also predicted that as collage replaced oil painting, that the TV tube would replace the canvas. He would go on to pioneer the use of broadcast, video installation, live events, and artist screening, all of which are modes practiced by artists today. And one last one by Pike. This is Self-Portrait from 2005. So within this framework of that brief background of the historical overview of video art, I wanted to now drive into a narrower lens of Mormon video art. And that is video art by projects of artists who are either Mormon themselves or whose work is informed by or influenced by the Mormon experience. To start, we'll look at some of the most culturally significant video pieces related to Mormons, works that have a long critical history and that are well known in the larger art world, and that show how Mormons have been depicted in the contemporary art world at large. We'll begin with Matthew Barney's Cremaster Cycle, and particularly Cremaster Cycle 2. Cremaster is a series of 5 video works produced over a number of years. While not LDS, Barney was raised in Boise, Idaho, and uses both the Utah and Idaho landscape as both a backdrop, but also a character in his films. And responding to a question about looking back at a place you've come from, Barney said, as a younger artist, I was more interested with the aspect of the culture in Idaho. In Cremaster 2, which was made in the Mormon Basin of northern Utah, I was carrying a narrative with me that had been brewing since my youth. Growing up in that area, it is now easier for me to just let it be what it is. So I will pull that up. I want to give you a little bit of background before we jump into it right away. Cremaster 2, it was made in 1999. It is a type of what Barney calls a Gothic Western. And it is structured around 3 interrelated themes, that of bees, the life cycle of bees, the story of Gary Gilmore, played by Barney himself, and the landscape as witness. Barney takes artistic license with the story of Gary Gilmore, but his real-life facts are these. Gilmore was raised by a Mormon mother who was from Provo, Utah, and an abusive father. And from an early age, he had trouble with the law, was in and out of jail. And in 1976, he moved to Provo to live with extended family. And seemingly unmotivated, he murdered 2 people, a gas station employee in Orem, Utah, and a motel manager from Provo. The act set in motion a trial and a verdict that would condemn him to death, a sentence he embraced despite all efforts to overturn it. And if you Google this story, you can see his statements condemning the, anti-death right campaigns. He made a very clear statement that this is what he wanted. Executed by a firing squad in Draper, Utah, he was the first person in nearly 10 years to be sentenced with capital punishment and executed. So the segment we'll watch, Barney is using the tabernacle that found on Temple Square as a symbol for the church, and the Great Salt Lake as a symbol of the land, to represent the cacophony of debates that center around the choice and ultimately the decision to re-engage with capital punishment. right. The next artist that I wanted to talk about is Paul McCarthy, not the Beatles, not the one you know, not Paul McCartney, but Paul McCarthy. Was born LDS in Salt Lake City. He studied at Weber State and at the University of Utah. From 1982 to 2002, he taught performance, video, and installation at UCLA. And his works primarily deal with video and sculpture. Like many other California artists who came of age around 1960, he was attracted to material messiness, the psychological fraughtness of the abstract expressionists, and he transmuted that into performances. He's very interested in that abject. McCarthy's video painter interrogates notions long held in art history, particularly as it relates to abstract expressionism, that madness is required for artistic genius, and that inspiration happens in isolation and surges out of psychic disruption. In the film, he is wearing a painter's robe that is part hospital gown. His exaggerated nose makes reference or manifest alcoholism, and the cartoonish enlarged hands use paint and other materials in chaotic ways. The video tackles the market aspects of art making when the painter stops by his dealer's office to discuss payment for all of his psychological trauma, of which he has worked out on canvas. Part Bob Ross instructional video, at least in the beginning, part stream of conscious self-talk, writer's block. And there's something really painful about watching it because there's part of you that relates to this moment of trying to create something, and then part of you that realizes the absurdity of it. This is an artist on the verge of a mental breakdown.
This is an ad for a project
Yikes.
called Monday.
That never happened in my rehearsals. Okay. All right. That's what you get for talking about decommodification in art, is videos in the middle of your presentation.
Okay. No, don't even talk to him like that. Don't even talk to him. Don't even talk to him. Okay. Trying to put this in here. No? Whoa, it's dark. But I can't do this anymore. Okay, mix this. Oh, I can't talk. Mix the blue. We mix the red with the black.
We'll skip the dealer for sake of time. But I'll show you really just a small. You get the point. That goes on for 10 minutes. So the next one I wanted to talk to you about was Angela Ellsworth. Angela is a direct descendant of Lorenzo Snow, often uses Mormon imagery in her work, particularly as a way to interrogate or understand her pioneer ancestry, specifically Mormon women who practiced polygamy. Because it has no sound, I can just play it while I talk. Her work, I've Been Standing Here, Standing Back, depicts a woman who is both or either a bonnet-wearing 19th century Mormon pioneer or a contemporary Mormon fundamentalist woman. The slipperiness in the costuming is, of course, a conscious choice, but not a critical one. Describing the figure which she herself staged, Ellsworth says she is at once monumental and weightless, but most importantly, a self-determined figure who is firmly in control of her being, actions, and destiny. There is a type of boldness in Ellsworth's figures, similar, to me at least, of Tygert's respectful and celebratory depictions of Mormon women pioneers, which he refers to it in at least two paintings as Madonna. One of them is Madonna of the Dawn, and the other one is Madonna of 1847. And there's something really just poetic about this stance there, either on the prairie, in the clouds of the prairie, or in the clouds of heaven. Again, that slipperiness, I think, is a conscious choice for her, and a really beautifulness of this figure and the blowing wind. The next work I wanted to talk about is Cara Despain's 19 Claims. 19 Claims explores the many facets of Joseph Smith and the multiple and conflicting ways in which he is both celebrated and critiqued, often molded as a persona according to individual histories, perspectives, agendas, and experiences. For this project, Despain cast 19 molds of Joseph Smith as a bust, and busts are, of course, often a type of sculpture reserved only for the most honored and historically significant of a community. And she takes the multiple versions, some successful molds, some not, and photographs them, splicing them together to make a moving and multiple depiction of Smith. And I see this not as this sort of, I see this as our view of Smith, not his actual likeness, but the way our view becomes warped or molded or manipulated based on kind of how we cast him or in clay ourselves. Drawing on the writings of Roland Barthes on photography is useful when exploring Despain's project on multiple representations. He says the photograph is the advent of myself as other, a cunning disassociation of consciousness from identity. He continues to explain that whether or not the subject is dead, every photograph is a catastrophe. This catastrophe, for Barthes, is caused by looking at an image that is familiar yet strange. Barthes borrows from Freud to call it unheimlich, or rather an uncanny experience. This photographic uncanniness disassociates consciousness from one's established self. Seeing oneself as frozen or preserved disrupts one's sense of self, making the viewer aware of one's own mortality and the temporariness of life and the eventual and inevitable end. For Barthes, photographs are ineffectively ghosts because they reference the actual because what they reference, the actual physical body, is inherently missing. While Barthes' comments are linked to photography, and especially photography of the self, looking into the mirror of the self, looking into the mirror of a photograph, they are useful here because of the firmness in which Joseph Smith exists in the mind of the believers and even in the mind of the American cultural landscape. And yet he remains, as our friend Richard Bushman describes, a rough stone rolling, a moving object, known and a noble, mythical, prophetic, large, and multivalent. The next work also does not have sound. Ascension 3, done in 2012 by BYU art professor Daniel Everett. The style of the work is austere, surreal, hypnotic, obsessively clean, exploring the contemporary urban non-landscape, including construction sites, parking lots, tops of buildings, and airport walkways. Influenced by artists such as Edward Burtynsky and Wally Beshte, it is in the in-between that is most often what he captures. As Nato Thompson suggested in Experimental Geographies, maps reflect not only physical realities, but the social realities of that space. The issues of cleanliness in his photographs creates a sort of digital space in a tangible space. So he makes a physical space feel digital by its sense of hyper-cleanliness. And rather than, and sort of vice versa, makes digital spaces feel physical. So rather, they aren't really quoting Burtynsky, but rather taking some of his language and adapting that within the age of the internet and the age of the digital revolution, where space exists upon multiple surfaces and multiple platforms. In the case of Ascension 3, the title suggests a type of religious experiment, perhaps as it relates to the elevators in the Provo Temple, the location, or a location as a type of banal experience, this walking through this kind of sight, non-sight, or the filmic quality is presents a sort of type of video game experience where you're kind of entering sort of an internal other. The next work I wanted to show you, I'm going to play first. Maybe.
The rain in Spain stays in the plain. 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 The rain in Spain.
In Well-Behaved Women, artist Amy Jorgensen juxtaposes two phrases, the rain in Spain, stains mainly on the plain, and our keynote speaker, Laurel Thatcher Ulrich's famed well-behaved women seldom make history. The first phrase, enunciated loudly, is the phonetic exercise used by My Fair Lady to teach, used in My Fair Lady to teach Eliza Doolittle to transform her once cockneyed speech to that of a well-spoken and pleasing lady. Yet echoing underneath this confident march of repetition is the haunting whisper of words, well-behaved women seldom make history. In this context, the whisper functions as a type of consciousness that references Jorgensen's suffragette ancestor, Edna Berg, undermining the clear public obedience found in Eliza. The dual monitors facing each other are, in fact, mere images of Jorgensen herself. But the images are fuzzy, unclear, and the continual representation of voices over and over, with the vocal intonations shifting, reflects the struggle to balance or topple the learned and performed behaviors women inherit with actions that could inform new identities. Our identity is at once plural and partial. Sometimes we feel we straddle two cultures. At times, we fall between two stools, said Salman Rushdie. Of course, he was describing the experience of transnationalists, but indeed, perhaps there is something in all of us that straddles the slippery places of two conflicting stances. The next I wanted to show you is Chase Westfall. This is a video called Control, and we'll watch it first. We'll start here. While that's loading, why don't I just talk about the piece for a minute. Chase Westfall's Control is a single-channel video work that captures the powerful rhythmic sound of the drummer Julian Dorio, a founding member of the band The Whigs. Julio was playing with the band the Eagles of Death Metal at the Bataclan Theater the night of the Paris attacks. And at that night, 89 people were killed. And many more injured, including their roadies and massive destruction experienced in that theater. In contrast to what happened at the Bataclan Theater Control presents Julian Dorio's intensive physical drumming as a constructive and redemptive expression of controlled violence. The music has this narrative arc, mapping out the sounds and emotions of Dorio's response to the evening, and at the end, it finishes at the site of fatigue, of notes that trip and stumble. Within the context of this video, Julian and the drums, which were at one time profoundly damaged as a result of the attack, stand in for the site of violence and act as witnesses of the violence, but are witnesses working towards redemption, witnesses reclaiming that space, witnesses in the path of healing. I'm going to just play a bit for you, maybe. Still spinning. Okay. Let me try reloading it one more time. Drumming itself is, of course, a type of violent act. The drums are a specific site where, like a punching bag, they are specifically designed to receive marked aggression. So Control explores a type of violence, both catastrophic and creative. And by interrogating these paradoxes, the video creates a space of inquiry for viewers as they are confronted with both the urgency and the intimacy of Dorio's performance. So we will try one more time. So for this, he's sort of playing out his feelings or the emotions or the pace of the evening. So the drums that were once mangled when an explosion went off right by them were then restored, and the video captures this sort of restoration that can happen when objects and people are reclaimed, when they seek to find redemption and transformation through any sort of medium of creative process that they have. Kelly Brooks's movement studies, domestic spaces, captures basically what looks like surveillance footage. But this is her cleaning, this is her making cookies. So on November 6th, 2008, from 12:42 to 1:06 p.m., Kelly Brooks made cookies with her children. She moves in and out and around the set specific site location, around her own domestic kitchen for a particular length of time. And while she does this, her daughter and her son wiggle, move around, go upstairs, go down, go outside, get distracted, leave. Brooks takes the footage. That's a different project. Brooks takes the footage of daily life, compresses the time, making the movements look frenetic and quick around, and revealing these sort of paths of movement that exist within kitchen, especially some domestic spaces. Kitchens are designed for set kind of paths of movement. So you see her following these sort of set parameters, and her children kind of meandering and breaking all sort of structures that exist within that kind of designed, structured space. And what she does with these videos is she takes them and creates movement drawings from them, and then displays the videos and the drawings simultaneously. So when she speeds up the time, she then watches the videos and chooses a person and picks a color and follows their movement. So you can look at this and figure out, who is Kelly and who is Ash and who is Tom, sort of by their sort of path of movement and where their movements stay and where their movements pull. When they stayed still, the marker stayed still, so that's why you see those sort of blotch marks, and when they move, the pen moves as well. In a way, they are maps, and they are maps that make evidence work that is often unseen. And there's sort of this reclamation of that space, this private embodied labor, which further realizes to have a particular spatial topography of the domestic kitchen as structured around particular set fixed motions. Brooks's map is as much about a labor as it is about a mother-child interaction. There's this sort of tenderness in the way these lines interplay and move with one another, and interact and dance with one another. Angela List, in the feminist art and the maternal, insists motherhood is still a crucial and still relevantly unexposed area for feminist theory. So what Brooks is doing is actually taking a pretty banal experience, or a pretty everyday experience, and making work from that material. Lastly, we have Colin Bradford. I don't know how to make this full. Oh, there it is. Accelerating the sun by riding a bike away from the sun as fast as I can. Bradford is on a bike trying to resist. So Bradford is on a bike, and what he's doing is he's trying to accelerate the sunset by riding towards the sun as fast as he can. So fitting for the closing work is Bradford, a two-channeled video where Bradford seeks to accelerate dusk by changing his movements. The left image shows the view of his stationary camera that serves as a starting point, and the right image shows the view of a camera mounted to the back of his bicycle as he rides as fast as he can eastwards where the sun sets earlier. In many ways, the video shows the passage of time, accelerating, time travel, a type of manipulation, and makes manifest the way our perspectives can alter by changing our position. Similar to Francis Elise's When Faith Moves Mountains, the project creates a type of powerful allegory, a metaphor for human will, that you can alter however small time, that you can use the landscape to change your perspectives. I will leave that on if I can turn off the sound. Yes, okay. Turn off the sound quietly. In closing, in Walter Benjamin's seminal essay, The Work of Art in the Age of Technological Reproductions, he suggests that authentic artworks contain a type of aura. This aura can be only experienced in the presence of the only physical, actual thing. The object becomes endowed with the type of power through its aura that can be tied to unique objects and linked to sort of practices and rituals. He writes, even in the most perfect reproductions, one thing is lacking, the here and now of the work of the art itself, its unique existence in a particular place. It is this unique existence and nothing else that bears the mark of history to which the work has been subject. The whole sphere of authenticity eludes technological reproductions. Benjamin, of course, was right in terms of reproductions lacking aura, especially as they relate to giclées, postcards, mass production. But his analysis, written in 1936, fails to see what the array of technological media can do when used, manipulated, harnessed, and seriously pursued as an artistic medium. Thank you. So we have 2 minutes for questions if you have any questions. Laurel.
Just a practical one, is there a list somewhere of the
Yeah, on my notes, but I can email it to you. It's not in my book. No, I'll okay. Yeah, I'd be happy to give it to you. Can we post it on the Mormon Arts website? When we post it on YouTube, they can put links and things like that. Yeah. Richard.
I'd like to know how you personally feel about this art. A lot of it, especially the first portion, was quite disturbing. And lots of art is meant to be disturbing. This seemed more powerfully disturbing. Most. I mean, it boggles the mind. You feel like you're going crazy, like an artist was. And when you talk, it sort of smooths things over. You have all these lovely words. But you feel the kind of gutsy, smasheroo aspects of this?
I think that's a good question, and maybe I'm answering it, maybe I'm not. I don't think all uplifting art has to be beautiful or, inspiring. I actually think that there can be art that can be, at times sort of jarring to you, that can teach you something or manifest something that you hadn't thought of before, or that is interrogating an area that causes you to look in ways that you hadn't looked, and I value that in these pieces. So maybe I punted, but that's my response.
And you make it so cerebral. You see things, et cetera, et cetera. What about the emotions it's teaching?
Yeah, I don't know. I think sometimes I do have a positive emotional response, and sometimes there is that kind of, like you said, it does provoke other emotions. Yeah. Anything else?
Are there any other LDS artists that you know of that are choosing video as their primary medium and are really developing that in their practice?
Most of the artists that I'm familiar with are working on multiple platforms. So a lot of photographers like Daniel Everett is really known as a photographer, but he slips into video. Levi Jackson is another one who's really trained as a photographer, but slips into video. And from what I can see, it tends to cross multiple platforms. So there's an artist named Jeannie Hui, I think. It's W-U-O. Not W, it's H-U-O, H-U-O, yeah. But I'm not entirely sure if she entirely works with, it seems more like it's performance and video, so there's a shared boundary between those. All right, thank you very much.